It was close to midnight when my phone started vibrating on the nightstand. I was already half asleep, stretched out in bed with the TV playing quietly in the background. Some rerun I wasn't really watching. The screen lit up with a name I hadn't seen in a while, and it stopped me cold. Luca. I stared at it for a second too long, thumb hovering above the screen. Luca Torres. My ex's twin brother. We hadn't spoken since the breakup. Not even a text. And the breakup hadn't exactly been friendly. Noah and I had ended on one of those, I hope you get hit by a bus, but also I still love you notes. It was messy. And Luca? He'd always been Switzerland during our relationship. Quiet. Reserved. Civil, but distant. It was hard to read him then, and honestly it was hard to read him now, so why was he calling me? I hesitated, then picked up. Hello? Hey. His voice came through, low and a little raspy, like he'd either been drinking or crying. Sorry. Did I wake you? Not really. Just in bed. I sat up, suddenly more awake. Is everything okay? Another pause. Could I come over? That got my attention. Tonight? Yeah, I know it's late and weird, but... He paused again, then let out a breath. I didn't know who else to call. I rubbed my eyes. Did something happen? No. Nothing dramatic. I don't feel like being alone tonight. I should have said no. I should have asked more questions. But there was something in his voice that stopped me. That same quiet intensity he always had. The kind that made you want to lean in closer, even when you knew better. All right, I said. You can come over. I'll be there in 20. I stood by the window the whole time, watching the empty street like I was expecting something else. Part of me thought I'd imagined the call, that he'd change his mind and never show. But then I saw the headlights cut through the quiet, and my chest tightened as his car pulled into the driveway. He got out wearing a hoodie and jeans, no jacket, hands stuffed deep in his pockets. The cold November air made his breath visible as he walked up to my porch. I opened the door before he could knock. Hey, he said softly. I stepped aside. Come in. He looked the same as I remembered. Same strong jawline, same dark eyes, same quiet energy that always felt like it carried weight. But there was something different tonight. Maybe it was the fatigue in his expression, or the way he looked at me like he wasn't entirely sure if this was a mistake. I led him to the living room and we both sat down. Him on the edge of the couch, me in the chair across from him. It was quiet for a minute. He didn't say anything. Just stared down at his hands. I finally broke the silence. Is this about Noah? Luca shook his head. No, not really. Then why me? He looked up at me, eyes searching mine for something. Because I knew you'd answer. And I didn't want to go somewhere I'd have to pretend I was fine. I swallowed hard, unsure what to say to that. We weren't friends. Not really. Just two people who had known each other from opposite sides of a complicated relationship. And yet, I got it. That feeling of not wanting to be alone, of just needing someone who knew you, even if only a little. I nodded toward the kitchen. Want a drink or something? No, I'm good, he said, then added, unless you're having one. I wasn't planning to, but I stood up. We can both not drink together. That got a faint smile out of him. I sat back down, and this time, closer. Still a full cushion between us, but closer. Luca leaned back, exhaling slowly. Can I ask you something? And you don't have to answer if it's too weird. Go ahead. He looked over at me, eyes darker in the dim lighting. Why did you and Noah break up? Like, really? I blinked. Wow. Jumping right in, huh? I just never got the full story. I looked away for a second, running my hand over the back of my neck. It wasn't one thing. It was a bunch of small things. We weren't good at being honest with each other. Not really, we fought. Then pretended we were fine. It felt like we were always performing. For each other, for everyone. Luca nodded slowly. That sounds like Noah. There was no bitterness in his voice. Just something sad and a little resigned. Then he said, Can I ask you one more thing? Sure. Did you ever look at me and wonder? My chest tightened. I didn't answer right away. I couldn't. Because, yes, I had. More times than I ever let myself admit. I looked at him then. Really looked at him. His jaw was tense, his eyes locked on mine, waiting. And maybe it was the late hour, or the quiet between us, or the fact that we were both carrying old wounds. But I didn't lie. "Yeah," I said quietly. "I did." His throat bobbed like he was swallowing something, and when he spoke again, his voice was lower, rougher. "Me too." I wasn't sure I heard him right at first. "Me too." It hung in the air like a challenge, or a confession, or maybe both. My living room suddenly felt a lot smaller, like the walls were leaning in, like the temperature had dropped or risen. I couldn't tell which. All I knew was my heartbeat was louder than the silence between us. "You too?" I repeated, my voice quieter than I intended. Luca didn't look away. "I used to tell myself it was just curiosity," he said. "Like, we looked similar, so maybe it made sense. That it was projection. That you were just still figuring things out with Noah and I was there. But I knew it wasn't that." I swallowed, my throat dry. "You never said anything." "Of course not." "You were with my brother." Right. That would have been a hell of a thing to admit." "And now?" I asked before I could think better of it. "What is this now?" He didn't answer right away. His fingers tapped lightly against his thigh, a subtle, restless rhythm. "I don't know. Maybe it's nothing. Maybe I'm just lonely, and you were familiar, and I needed something." The way he said something made my stomach twist. Not in a bad way. Just in that dangerous, slippery kind of way. Like he knew exactly what he was saying and how close we were to crossing a line we couldn't uncross. I leaned forward a little, resting my elbows on my knees, watching him. "If this is just about feeling lonely tonight, that's fine. I get that. But if you're trying to test the waters, I'm not trying to mess with you." He cut in. "I'm not Noah." That stopped me. "I know," I said, and I did. Luca was quieter. He didn't perform for attention the way Noah did. He didn't need a room to validate him. He could sit with silence and let it say more than words. I used to catch myself watching him back then, wondering how two people could look the same but feel so different. He shifted slightly on the couch, angling his body more toward me now. "Do you remember that night you stayed over after your birthday dinner?" "Yeah," I said slowly. "The night Noah forgot to come home." Luca gave a soft, dry laugh. "I found you asleep on the couch. I covered you with a blanket, but you were shivering, so I sat by you until you stopped." I blinked. "You never told me that." "I know." He looked down at his hands. "I wanted to. I almost did. But you were already too deep into it with him. And I thought if I opened that door, it would ruin everything." The weight of that hit harder than I expected. He'd felt something too. Back then, he just buried it. "So why now?" I asked, more careful with my voice. "Why tonight?" Luca looked up at me. His eyes were darker than Noah's. Not in color, but in something else. He always held emotion differently, deeper, because I couldn't stop thinking about you. And I was tired of pretending like I didn't. I didn't move, didn't speak. But I felt it. That slow draw between us, the gravity of whatever this was. He leaned in slightly. "Can I ask you something else?" "Yeah. Do I remind you of him?" I shook my head. "No." He searched my face. "Even now?" "No," I repeated, firmer this time. "You don't." I reached out before I could stop myself and rested my hand lightly over his. His fingers twitched under mine but didn't pull away. He was warm, steady, and then his eyes dropped to my mouth. He didn't lean in right away. He gave me time, gave me space to move or change my mind. But I didn't. I held still, half because I was afraid to move, half because I didn't want to. Then, quietly, barely more than a breath, he said, "I don't want this to be a one-night mistake." "It won't be," I said, "unless you disappear after this." He smiled, just a little. "I'm not going anywhere." And then he kissed me. It wasn't rushed, it wasn't sloppy. It was soft, deliberate, like he was testing the idea of us, With every second, his lips were on mine. I kissed him back, and that's when everything changed. The kiss didn't last long, just enough to make my skin prickle and my heart trip over itself. When we pulled apart, Luca didn't move right away. He stayed close, forehead hovering just inches from mine, like he was still deciding if this was real or some impulsive mistake. "It felt different," he murmured. "What did?" He looked at me, eyes softer now. "You." I didn't know how to respond to that, because, yeah, it did feel different. Kissing Luca wasn't like kissing Noah. There was no game, no power play, no wondering if it meant anything past the surface. With Noah, it always felt like he was half somewhere else, even when his hands were on me. With Luca, it felt like I was the only thing in the room. I leaned back a little, needing space to think, to breathe. Luca didn't stop me. He just sat there, watching, respectful patient. "You sure you're not just emotional?" I asked. "Feeling lonely? Maybe looking for something familiar?" "I wouldn't have come here if I wasn't sure," he said. "I didn't call anyone else, just you." The word sat heavy in the air. I had questions. So many. But I didn't want to ruin whatever this was by picking it apart too fast. Still, there was one thing I had to ask. "Does Noah know you're here?" Luca's jaw tightened just slightly. "No." "Would he care?" "I don't know." He looked away for the first time. "Maybe. Probably." "You two still talk?" "Not about anything real," he admitted. "We're not as close as people think. We never have been." That surprised me. From the outside, they always looked inseparable. But I guess even twins could drift. "I spent a lot of time watching you when you were with him," he said suddenly. "Not in a creepy way. Just curious. You were good for him." "I saw that." I raised an eyebrow. "Then why are you here now?" He paused, chewing on his lip for a second. "Because I started wondering what it would have been like if it had been me instead of him." My throat went dry. "And I hated myself for thinking that," he added, "but I never stopped. Something in me softened, because I knew that feeling. I'd wondered the same thing, secretly, in those late-night silences when Noah would be in the next room, half-heartedly texting back while I stared at the ceiling, feeling more alone than I wanted to admit. I stood up, mostly just to move, to do something with my hands. "This is a lot, I know. I didn't expect you to show up tonight and drop all this on me. I didn't expect to say it," he said, standing too, "but I don't regret it." We stood there in the middle of the room, unsure what the next move was. This was the part where things usually fell apart, where one person stepped back and the moment dissolved into awkwardness. But Luca didn't step back. He stepped closer. "I'm not asking for anything right now," he said. "Not a relationship. Not whatever this might be. I just needed to be honest. And I wanted to see if you felt it too." "I do," I said quietly. "I have for a while." That was the first time he looked truly relieved. Like something he'd been carrying around for years finally slid off his shoulders. He reached out and touched my hand again. This time, it wasn't careful, it was grounding. "I should probably go," he said, but made no move to actually leave. "You don't have to." He looked at me, hesitant. "You sure?" "I'm sure." So we didn't say anything else. We just moved together, slowly, carefully, like the tension had finally broken, and now all that was left was this quiet understanding that had always been there, underneath. He followed me to my room, not with urgency, but like we both knew this was going to happen eventually. It was only a matter of when. He didn't ask for anything. He just laid beside me on top of the covers, and I did the same. We didn't touch, not at first. We just stared up at the ceiling in the dark. And after a few minutes, I felt his hand slide gently over mine, no pressure. Just there. And I let it stay. It's strange how some moments feel louder in silence. The sound of breathing, the weight of stillness. The way your body can feel someone else's presence, even when they're not touching you. Just near enough to make your skin aware. That's how it was with Luca beside me in bed. He didn't say anything, neither did I. His hand rested lightly over mine, not gripping, not pulling, just there. And the longer we lay like that, the more real it all became. Not a dream, not a late-night lapse in judgment, just real. At some point, I turned toward him. He was already facing me. It was dark, but I could still make out the line of his jaw, the quiet focus in his expression. I wasn't sure if he was nervous or just thinking. He had the kind of face that didn't give much away, but when his thumb grazed the back of my hand, I felt the smallest shift. A question, maybe. I answered it by moving closer. Not much, just a few inches, enough to feel his breath against my cheek. You always sleep like this? I asked softly, trying to break the tension without shattering it. He gave a quiet laugh. Only when I'm trying not to do something stupid. Like what? His eyes searched mine. Like kissing you again. I didn't hesitate this time. You could. His fingers flexed slightly against mine. You sure? Yeah, I said. I'm sure. He leaned in, slowly, deliberately. When our lips met, it felt steadier than before, more certain. There was no rush, no urgency. Just the kind of kiss that said, I've wanted this for a long time. And I had. God, I had. His hand slid up to my face, fingers grazing my cheek like he didn't quite believe this was happening. I kissed him again, deeper this time, letting my hand move up to rest on his chest. He was warm, solid, familiar in all the ways that mattered, and completely new in others. We pulled apart, barely. I was afraid this would feel like I was betraying him, I admitted, my voice low. Luca didn't pull away. Does it? I thought about it. No, I said. Not even a little. His eyes softened. Me neither. We didn't go any further than that. No clothes came off. No sudden breaths or tangled sheets. Just slow, lingering kisses. Hands learning what it felt like to be allowed to touch, to be curious, to be honest. It wasn't about anything physical. It was intimate. And I hadn't realized how much I needed that until I had it. Eventually we stopped kissing, but we didn't stop touching. My head ended up on his chest, his hand resting between my shoulder blades. I could hear his heartbeat, steady, unhurried. I didn't expect this, I said after a while. I didn't either, he replied. I didn't even expect you to answer the call. I smiled against him. Me neither. I almost didn't. I'm glad you did. Me too. We fell asleep like that. No alarms, no looming questions. Just two people, finally leaning into something we'd both been pushing away for too long. Yeah. And when I woke up in the morning, the first thing I saw was him. Still asleep, still here, still real. I woke up to the faint sound of rain tapping against the window, that soft, rhythmic kind that makes everything feel a little slower, a little more intimate. The room was dim, overcast light filtering through the curtains. I blinked a few times before realizing I wasn't alone. Luca was still next to me, still here. His arm was loosely draped around my waist, and his face was turned toward mine, relaxed, peaceful, in a way I wasn't used to seeing. It struck me all at once how familiar his face was, and yet how different it felt now. I'd spent so much time trying not to look at him, to avoid any comparison to Noah, to ignore the flickers of interest I wasn't supposed to have. But now I couldn't stop looking. His hair was slightly messy from sleep, and there was a faint crease on his cheek from the pillow. I don't know what made me do it, but I reached out and brushed my thumb lightly along his jaw. He stirred at the touch, eyes fluttering open slowly. For a moment, he just looked at me. No panic, no confusion, just quiet acknowledgement. "Morning," he said, voice rough with sleep. "Morning." He didn't pull away, didn't shift like he was realizing some mistake had been made. Instead, he asked, "What time is it?" I glanced at the clock on the nightstand. "Almost 9." He hummed, eyes drifting shut again for a moment. "Didn't think I'd sleep that well." "Me either." A pause. Then, without opening his eyes, he said, "This doesn't have to mean anything if you don't want it to." It caught me off guard. "Is that what you want?" I asked carefully. His eyes opened again, meeting mine. No, he said, but I don't want to assume. I know how weird this probably feels for you. It's not weird, I said. It's unexpected, but not weird. He nodded slowly, like that was enough for now. We stayed in bed for a while longer, neither of us in a rush to move. When we finally did, it was quiet and easy. No awkwardness. Just the normal morning shuffle, stretching, brushing teeth, throwing on yesterday's clothes. He made coffee like he'd done it 100 times in my kitchen, even though he hadn't. You want toast or something? I asked, leaning against the counter. He handed me a mug. I'll eat whatever you're having. I raised an eyebrow. So if I said cold pizza, he smirked, I'd ask for hot sauce. That made me laugh, and for a moment it felt like we were skipping over something. Like we'd known each other longer than we actually had. Or maybe we were just catching up on the time we lost, pretending we didn't see each other. I watched him as he leaned against the opposite counter, sipping his coffee, eyes flicking out toward the rain-soaked street. You okay? I asked. He looked at me, surprised by the question. Yeah, just thinking. About? He exhaled. About how weird it is that this feels normal. Like sitting here with you. Drinking coffee. Like I've done it 1,000 times. I nodded. It doesn't feel forced. No, he said, quieter now. It doesn't. I took a sip of my own coffee, heart thudding quietly in my chest. I don't know where this goes, I admitted. Me neither. But I'm not in a hurry to make it disappear either. Luca's eyes met mine again. Steady. Clear. Good, he said. Because I'm not running from it. We didn't define anything that morning. There were no labels, no declarations, just an unspoken agreement. This is happening. And for once, neither of us wanted to pretend otherwise. We spent the rest of that Sunday in this strange, quiet rhythm. Two people circling something fragile but undeniably alive. Luca didn't rush to leave, and I didn't ask him to. We sat on the couch for a while, watching the rain paint streaks on the windows. We didn't talk about the night before, or Noah, or what this was. But everything felt like a conversation. The glances, the half-smiles, the way his hand would brush against mine and just stay there. Around noon, I ordered takeout, and we ate on the couch, shoulder to shoulder, flipping through Netflix like it was the most natural thing in the world. It wasn't. Not really. But it was easy. And that was the part that kept surprising me. It wasn't supposed to be easy. Luca looked over during the 3rd episode of whatever we settled on, some cooking show neither of us was watching, and said, Can I ask you something kind of selfish? Sure, I said, bracing slightly. If Noah finds out, would you regret this? The question hit harder than I expected. Not because I hadn't thought about it, but because I had. All morning. All night, if I'm being honest. Would it feel like a betrayal? Would it blow up everything? Maybe. But I looked at him, really looked at him, his posture slightly tense, his fingers knotted together like he was preparing for impact. No, I said, I'd worry. I'd feel complicated. But I wouldn't regret you. His shoulders eased a bit. I don't want to be a complication, he said. I've never wanted to be part of the drama. You're not. Not unless we make it one. He nodded slowly. I've been second to Noah in everything for so long. It's kind of surreal sitting here with you. Like, I don't have to be anyone else right now. That hit deeper than I expected. Hey, I said, leaning forward slightly. You're not second right now. You're not even next. You're you. And I see you. He looked up at me, and for a second his guard dropped entirely. You have no idea how good that feels to hear, he said, voice low. I reached over, resting my hand on his knee. He covered it with his own. It wasn't romantic in that moment, not really. It was something else. Something deeper. Like trust. Quietly cementing itself between us. Later that afternoon, he stood by the door, hoodie on, keys in hand. The rain had stopped, but the sky was still low and gray. I should go, he said, and this time he meant it. I nodded. Okay. He opened the door but hesitated, turning back to me. I want to see you again, he said, but I don't want to sneak around. We won't, I told him, but let's take it slow, yeah? His mouth curved into a half smile. Slow works. He leaned in, gave me a soft kiss. Brief, intentional. Then he was gone. I stood there in the quiet afterward, feeling the echo of his presence, wondering how I'd explain this if I ever had to. Wondering if I'd even try. Because for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I was waiting for the other shoe to drop. I just felt right. Luca didn't text the next day, or the day after. At first, I tried not to overthink it. Maybe he was busy. Maybe he was letting it breathe, trying not to come on too strong. But by the third day, that familiar hum of self-doubt started to creep in. Had I misread something? Had he changed his mind? I told myself not to reach out, so of course I did. Me. Hey, just checking in. No pressure. Just wondering how you're doing. He replied an hour later. Luca. Hey, sorry I've been quiet. Everything's fine. Just needed a couple days to think. Can we talk soon? I stared at the screen for a long moment. The words weren't bad, but they weren't good either. Me. Yeah, whenever you're ready. That night, around 8, there was a knock on my door. I opened it to find him standing there, no hoodie this time. Just jeans and a plain tee, hair slightly tousled like he'd run his hands through it a few too many times. Hey, he said, voice a little tense. Hey. He stepped in, didn't wait for an invitation, just walked into the living room like he had last time, but slower this time. I followed, unsure of what I was about to hear. He stood by the window for a second, looking out at the street, then turned to face me. I told him, he said. My stomach dropped. Noah? Luca nodded. I told him I was with you the other night, that I kissed you, that I meant it. I blinked, shocked. What did he say? He was quiet for a long time. Then he told me I was a piece of shit. I swallowed hard. I'm sorry, he shook his head. Don't be, I kind of expected it. And now? He's not speaking to me. Said I crossed a line. Said you were off limits? I sat down on the edge of the couch, suddenly feeling like the air had gotten thinner. Maybe I was, I muttered. Luca looked at me. Do you think you were? I didn't answer right away. I didn't know how to. Everything felt gray. What we'd shared had been real. I knew that, but the ripple it caused, maybe that was always going to sting. I think, I said slowly, that we didn't ask for this. But now that it's here, it matters. Luca sat beside me, closer than before. I'm not going to disappear. I don't want you to, I said. But this won't be simple, he added. No, I agreed. But when has anything worth having ever been simple? He smiled faintly. You're different than I thought. How so? I used to think you were too careful, like you only showed people the polished version of yourself. But now, I don't know, you feel more real. I looked at him. Maybe you just never saw me when I was with the right person. He paused. Do you think I could be that person? I didn't blink, didn't look away. I think you already are. He leaned in, this time not for a kiss, but to rest his forehead against mine. It was the kind of gesture that felt bigger than it looked. Quiet. Intimate. Solid. We didn't make any big promises that night. We didn't map out a future. But for the first time, we didn't need to. We were already living the answer. It's funny how something that starts with a late-night call can shift your entire world. A few weeks passed. Luca and I didn't jump into anything dramatic. We didn't slap on labels or change our relationship status. We didn't make each other breakfast every morning or post soft launch photos. But we texted, we saw each other, we chose each other slowly, intentionally. We'd grab coffee and end up talking for hours. He'd swing by late after work and sit on my couch like he'd always belonged there. We'd touch each other's hands without hesitation now. And sometimes, only when it felt right, he'd stay the night. No expectations, no pressure, just presence. One night, while we were lying in bed, he asked me something unexpected. Do you ever think about how different this all would have been if we'd met first? I thought about it. I used to, I admitted. But now I think we met exactly when we needed to. He nodded like that answer satisfied something in him. We still hadn't told many people. A few close friends knew. Most didn't. And Noah? He still hadn't spoken to me. Or Luca. But the silence didn't carry as much weight as I thought it would. Because the truth was, I wasn't living in his shadow anymore. I wasn't in Luca's shadow either. We were creating something that didn't exist before. Not a rebound, not a loophole, not a mistake. Just us, quietly unfolding. The day it really sank in was when Luca invited me to dinner with his mom. I almost laughed when he asked. "She knows?" I said. He smiled, a little sheepish. I didn't exactly say it. But she knows. Moms always do. I agreed to go. That night, sitting across from her at her kitchen table, I watched as Luca casually reached for my hand under the table. Just a light touch. Just enough to say I'm here. And when his mom looked between us and smiled, like she saw right through everything we weren't saying out loud, I didn't panic. I felt still. After dinner, as we were leaving, she pulled me aside, just for a second. "He's better with you," she said. "He's quieter, but not lonely." I nodded, throat tight. "I'm trying to be good for him." "You already are," she said simply. "Just don't disappear on him. He's had enough of that." That hit me harder than I expected. Later, back at my place, Luca kicked off his shoes and dropped onto my bed like it was routine. Because by then, it was. We both knew it. We were no longer pretending this was temporary. He looked over at me and said, "You know, this could have gone 100 different ways." "It still could," I said. "But I like this one," he replied. "I like where it's going," I nodded. "So do I." And maybe that was the best part. Not the kiss. Not the night he showed up. Not even the thrill of what we'd discovered. But the quiet after. The way we fit, unintended, a little messy, but real. The kind of real you don't run from. So yeah, my ex's twin brother called me late at night and asked to come over. And everything that followed? It wasn't the scandal. It was the start.